We're going to be talking about support systems. Um, and I'm really excited to talk about this because I do feel that a lot of people don't know where to get support. That's why a lot of the conversation in the previous panel was about asking for accommodations because we desperately need it. So we're going to kind of tell you what's available to you, and we're also going to tell you what to do, why you need the support. Sadie gracefully decided to help me with this today. We were supposed to have somebody else, Cassandra Pierre, the president of the WeSys Neurodiversity Affiliate. She is unwell and unable to do this today, but as you saw in the last talk, Sadie is definitely capable of handling it. So, all right, I already presented it, so I'm just going to move forward. This is me. I'm Stephanie Hezuku. I am the chair for this event. I am also a security engineer at Cisco and the vice president of the WeSys Neurodiversity Affiliate. And Sadie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello again. So I work at SANS as an SROC engineer. I work on the courseware development. You learned that I am also known as the real STEM Sadie. And yeah, I've been diagnosed at the age of 5 with a myriad of acronyms.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, my flavor is ADHD. I'm sure there's other stuff there, but that's the one that's official. All right, so to open us up, we have this amazing quote. It said mental health, but I feel like it applies to neurodiversity. What neurodiversity needs more is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation. And that is by Glenn Close. So that's what we're doing in this summit. And thankfully we have this opportunity to do this 2 years in a row. So it's amazing. All right, we're going to start off with the first question, which is why do we need support in the first place? Do you want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, I think we all realize that the system really isn't built, really any system isn't built with the outliers in mind, right? And that applies in cybersecurity as well. If you can get 90% of the stuff, that's pretty good. So, we need support to be able to highlight those issues that occur in that 10 or, 1%. Luckily, we're realizing as the years go on and as more people become more vocal, more research is being done, that there are a lot more neurodivergent people out there than people originally realized. And I think that we all realize that we need support, but since it is such a complex issue, how do you give that support while also receiving the support yourself is a big thing. How about you?
In general, I feel like there's that saying, I feel like it's an African proverb, but don't quote me, which is like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I think that in general, if you would like to get to whatever your version of success is, you're going to need some sort of help to do that. The same thing with neurodiversity. A lot of us find out later on in life that we're neurodiverse. Some of us were fortunate enough to find out earlier in childhood, but those of us that slip through the cracks, whether you're the child of immigrants like I am, or you are just from a family that doesn't know anything about neurodiversity, you may be 30 or 40, or even I met someone recently that was like in their 50s when they found out that they had autism. So I don't know if anybody's privy to this, but when you find out, there's the relief of, okay, I have a name to kind of describe what's going on. However, there's the grief of, oh my gosh, how many opportunities have I missed? And also the journey ahead to try to figure out how to get yourself in a functional way for your life. And with anything that has grief, you have to have people around going through that. It's maybe possible for some of us, but it's it's very difficult. So support, somebody to talk to, even if it's just to share your stories, super key, just so that you don't lose your mind and your sanity and your resilience, because the process is not forgiving, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So
I think it's a good point. I think it's also important to highlight too. I think when people think about neurodiversity or, more typical autism, there's a lot of negative stories, right? There's a lot of people who didn't make it. And like you said, getting that diagnosis seems kind of bittersweet. But having a support system, also people cheering you on. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, that hype girl mentality, having the same thing for neurodivergent people too, right? You made it through the day and you ate breakfast and you actually, you took care of yourself and you accomplished everything you set out to do.
yeah.
Like, good job for you.
Yeah.
Like, having that support system to be there when you need it most in the worst way and in the best way is really important. And also people to make you feel like, it may not define you wholly, but it's another nugget of your story that's worth sharing.
Yep, yep. And also it's not talked about enough. Even today, when I was talking about the event, somebody was like, I've never even heard that word neurodiverse. So what is that? So much of that is going on. When you have something that's kind of invisible or at least not widely consumed, you can feel like a crazy person talking about it. So having people that you can educate once and not over and over and over again, you wouldn't believe how invaluable that is. So yes, and now we're going to talk about what types of support are possible. And I want to also say I put possible there because what's available will vary depending on what state you're in, depending on what country you're in, depending on what industry you're in. So
What year it is?
what year it is, and sometimes that doesn't matter. But I'm going to discuss what's possible as far as I know and as far as she knows. So we're going to do our best, but know that this is not a definitive list or an exhaustive list. Like there are definitely going to be some things that we don't cover.
And share it in the Slack channels. I mean, that's what they're for, right?
Yes.
We're a community right now. Get in the Slack channels, share your experiences, share your supports. If we don't mention it, let us know. I mean, we're always trying to learn more.
Yeah, so I will start off by one and then we'll just volley back and forth. But therapy, life changer, life changer. Honestly, it was through therapy that I even found out I was neurodivergent. I was just complaining about I can't concentrate. I think for the first time in my life, like my personal was big enough that it was very distracting to my 9 to 5. And most of my life, I had been able to figure it out, especially when money is involved. If there was a job, I was definitely going to do my best to do it. It was a very huge motivator for me. So when I wasn't able to balance the two, therapy really helped because being able to talk to someone week to week and talk about what I'm struggling with, why I'm struggling with it, and then her say, "Ooh, that sounds a little bit like ADHD. Have you ever talked to anybody about that?" And me immediately being like, "No, are you crazy and drunk? I'm definitely never talking to anybody about that." But it kicked off the gears to where like 6 months later, I finally was like, I gotta do something because this is really stressing me out. And then I got the diagnosis officially from a psychiatrist. So that is like therapy is always going to be my road dog and my first recommendation to people. What would you say one is for you?
I think probably off the bat that I could think of, I think people who are new to the idea of being labeled or to the idea of considering that they might have a neurodivergent quality, reach out to people in the industry. I mean, especially at the SANS Institute. Like I mentioned in the previous panel, like I attended these summits. I attended all of them. I was extreme. And I asked a lot of questions and I made a lot of contacts because people at SANS want to teach you things and want you to learn. And you start to pick up on the fact that people, we are not so different, right? And you realize that we have a lot of the same traits. And once you start learning about yourself and start learning about neurodiversity, a lot of the people that you meet, have those qualities too, and they're successful and they know all these things. And so, reach out in your community if you're curious about what's going on. I mean, even if people don't say it, you can kind of pick up on it, and it does kind of give you that positive reinforcement, right? I think we tend to, unfortunately, go to fight or flight mode, right? Like sometimes people go to a therapist when things are only bad, right? And when they're at their worst, just figure out, what's wrong. But going when you're in a positive place is good too, because you're celebrating some things and learning some things at the same time. So definitely turning to the industry and just kind of noting, the qualities of others and seeing yourself in others in a positive way would be my first recommendation.
Yeah, and just rapid fire, like finding a community in our keynotes. The keynote speaker, he mentioned a lot of different organizations that support diverse folks in general when it comes to jobs and as well as schooling. So finding groups that have a way or a space for neurodiverse people is very important. Also a community of sorts, like I have the We Sis Neurodiversity affiliate. I'm a part of that. We do events and things like that. But being around more people that speak the language is important because when you find the diagnosis, everyone around you, I mean, you'll hear varied responses. Some people will say, wow, I can't relate. That's great for you though. Glad you're getting the help you need. Some people will say things like, oh, that sounds like my life. I don't know. I might have some of that too. And then some people are like very against it. I don't believe in that. That doesn't exist. So throughout all of that, you're going to need people who are like me too, or even in conversation when you're talking to them, you're spacing, you're apologizing for going on the 7th tangent in one conversation in the span of 5 minutes. And they're like, girl, it's going to be my turn in 10 minutes. So it's completely fine. I think there's something that is freeing. I want to use a term, I want to use a phrase, but I don't think it's appropriate. But it's the equivalent of, I guess, taking off a harness that's digging into you. And you're feeling,
Bra.
I was going to say, so she's
Like a harness is more hardcore, but all right.
I just wanted to be inclusive. But yeah, it's like taking a bra off at the end of the day. You feel like, oh God. Like it's freeing to not have to like mask up or like put on airs of like, I'm really focused on you and paying attention, though I'm not paying attention. And people are way more understanding when they are neurodiverse. So having people that speak the language is super important. Did you think of anything else?
I think also, I mean, I was going to say education, because I think no matter, if someone is telling you that you have a diagnosis, or if you're just self-diagnosing yourself, or someone says this is the way to do it, take medication, don't take medication, keep an open mind, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there. Take it all in, digest it. That way you're not defensive when other people suggest things or make comments, because I think it's really good to be in a group of people that get it. But the reality is you're going to be in a world where people aren't going to get it.
Yeah.
And, unless you're in that group 24/7, you need to learn how to communicate and associate with them in a positive way. So learning more about everything, and then saying, okay, these are what work for me, but I understand there's other things out there. It also helps you vilify others, right? And walk in someone else's shoes and say, okay, yeah, you don't go to that's crazy pants, like that's just nonsense. You go to, maybe that works for them. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, and sometimes you try on the hat and it doesn't fit and you put it back.
Mhm.
But I feel like being open to trying on different things, like you said, there's so many things that people have mentioned. I'm like, I'm gonna try that, or maybe programs, websites, apps that help or are supposed to be catered to neurodiverse people, specifically ADHD, because that's my flavor. And you try it, and sometimes it works for a month, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think that's great advice to stay open, I think it's also easy to do because we get bored very easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And also, like the last panel said, and that doesn't just apply to education, right? It applies to everything. I mean, if I'm using an application and it's not convenient for me, sometimes I'll tweet about it, just see what happens, right? I mean, I think I did that with I think a volatility tool or something. And I was like, hey, this is really kind of not working for this thing. And someone tweets back, say, hey, this is a good workaround, or hey, why don't you think about it like this, right? You can apply that to neurodiversity as well. Hey, I'm struggling with, making sure I eat breakfast, what's going on, right? Get things into the ether, like reach out. Don't be afraid to question things. Hey, can this app be better? Hey, can you add this accommodation? The worst people can say is no. And then it's kind of done.
yeah, and I would say a caveat to that is don't get caught in the trap that this is going to be easy, because I mean, your whole life hasn't been easy, but also everybody thinks after the diagnosis, my life is smooth sailing. That's not always the case. Sometimes you will have to try something works now, it doesn't work then. So I wanted to just add that to what you said. So we're going to move forward because time is limited. All right, so tips on building a support network. I really like this section because we can give you something tangible to take away and also give you insight into like what we do. I think that my flavor of life is just to do things that make me feel like I'm challenging myself. I'm sitting in front of you today, but you wouldn't know I have stage fright. really bad stage fright. So I just throw myself into talks and speaking gigs because I'm like, that's gonna get rid of it, exposure therapy. But I know it's also an incentive for me. So I joined an organization where I could do this sometimes and host events and things like that, because that's my skill set. I think taking or using your interests and aligning your interests to this type of thing is probably the most practical. And it gives you more to talk about than just like showing your vulnerability as soon as you meet someone. Oh, my flavor is ADHD and I was diagnosed here, and it's like this whole long thing. Whereas it's like, no, we're here for an event, we're here for this. And then this is stuff that just comes out naturally and organically as we're communing with each other. So I tend to follow my interests and then, try to specify within my interests. What is the tip that you have?
I mean, I think that's huge. I think that's the biggest one, right? I mean, as I said before, some of you probably came in here, right? Just from the courses, right? And you said, I don't even know what neurodiversity is. I'm going to sit here. And you're learning that not only are we neurodiverse, like we're cyber people. Well, I could talk your ear off all day about cyber. But you're going to learn a little bit about neurodiversity too. And I think that's great. And also getting a support network. I think that, again, asking questions to the ether, to people you meet, hey, what do you do for a living? And they tell you the job, oh, that's great. I was thinking about applying to a job like that, but I have this concern. Have you ever, gone through something similar? I mean, there is the possibility you might overshare, but there's also the possibility that you might gain some really great insight. As you mentioned, life is difficult, right? And until we experience something, we don't know the answer, which sucks. So if we can connect with people and learn their experiences, right, we don't really have to keep going through the same exact possibly negative experience again. So just talk with people, have a conversation. And again, you don't have to use scary words. You don't have to say, hey, I'm neurodivergent. How are you? Even in a classroom setting or even in a workplace, like I found it helpful to be like, hey, there's a lot of noise going on. It's really distracting. Anybody else find that distracting? That small thing, someone says, yeah, it is really distracting. Maybe we should get noise canceling headphones. Boom, you have accommodations and you found an ally secretly. They just don't know you're their ally yet,
Yeah. Yeah. Another tip, I like that tip, by the way. Another tip I have is a little unconventional, but through therapy, again, I'm plugging it again. Sometimes, depending on the therapist's specialization, they'll have like group support. A lot of people don't want people in their business. They'd rather just a small section of people know that they have neurodiversity and that's it. And I feel like it's a great private, protected space to kind of share everything. And people get really like, I haven't done group for neurodiversity, but I do know that I had a therapist that was an ADHD therapist and she had a group. It just helps because it's a very specialized environment. And then there's always a therapist there to kind of speak to the comorbidity, which is the tendency for neurodiverse folk to also suffer from something else, like whether it be depression, anxiety, or something, just because living your life as a neurodiverse person and people not understanding it when you're younger, you get a lot of negative feedback. So you can internalize it and develop anxiety and depression because you're not meeting the neurotypical mark. So because of that, we tend to have high amounts of anxiety and depression. And I think having a therapist there to talk about some of those things, because a lot of them overlap, is super important. So I'm always going to plug therapy, just get it in your head now. And I'll add another one before switching it back to you. These orgs, and I know I've said it many times already, but it really is something about saying your experience and then someone either saying, oh, here's a workaround, like you said earlier, or you're doing it the hard way, this is an easy way, or just me too. Because me and my youngest brother are the only diagnosed in my family. None of my friends, even though they're like, every time you talk about it, I relate. And I'm like, you should get checked out. But I'm the only one. My youngest brother is also the one, he followed my footsteps. There's nobody around to really talk about stuff with. So when you go to these organizations, and it's kind of like coming to a security event, you're a part of a big company that does more than security most of the time. I don't know everybody in the crowd, but you feel good when you come to a security event because you're like, everybody knows my language. You know, when I say certain terms, you're going to be like, yes, and you don't have to explain or, bring it down to like layman's terms. You can kind of speak naturally. It's the same thing when you go to neurodiverse events or are a part of neurodiverse groups. So I would push that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think another one I would say is, if you're hesitant to reach out or ask questions, praise somebody, right? If you see somebody at a conference and they do something about neurodiversity that you find interesting, even if you don't relate to it, say, hey, that was a great talk, right? Because you're gonna, when you're being positive, you're gonna attract more people, and just having people in your network that aren't just neurodiverse, but are diverse, right? You'll learn a lot. And then another thing I will caveat is, I like to have people in my support network who are neurotypical as well, because sometimes we get wrapped up in the neurodiverse world, just as people do in the neurotypical world, and we forget about the fact that we have different jargon, right? There are going to be barriers. You're going to be going down a rabbit hole, right? And you might be hyper focused on the fact that you're neurodivergent. This is a neurodivergent conference. It's a lot of neurodiversity. But if you're day in and day out living it without thinking about other things in your life, it sometimes can get depressing or down a deep hole. You need someone to kind of remind you that you're also a human being. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. So having a neurotypical person who gets it, but doesn't feel it deep down, I think is important. It gives you that sanity check to say, okay, I'm able to explain what I'm feeling to somebody who doesn't have, any neurodivergent qualities, but I'm able to have their support and their respect is a big deal.
I agree with that. Did you have another tip? Because I'm all.
Use social media. I mean, social media it's pros and cons all the way. You get rabbit holes, Twitter, no Twitter, Mastodon, there's all kinds of things that happen. But at the end of the day, communicate with people however you can, and just make an effort. I mean, you don't know if you don't try. That's kind of the motto of everything, especially when it comes to neurodivergence. We all try things, we fail at them, and then we try to figure out a different way to do it, and maybe we fail again. And that includes building your network, right? You're going to find people who are going to fade in and fade out of your network. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's also life. Sometimes you have a coworker who's a friend for life, and sometimes you never see them again. So same thing here. And also another caveat I wanted to add to that is, I hate to stress this because I don't want to depress people, but it's just the truth. The road is long and it's hard and there's no support whatsoever. You'll go to one doctor and they have their method, which we know what the healthcare system is like here in the States. For those international people viewing, not where you are, but here in the States, you can go to one doctor, they tell you one thing, get a second opinion, they tell you a different thing, get a third opinion, they tell you another thing. Some people say, only children have this, so I'm not diagnosing you with this. There are some states that literally will not give diagnosis to some of the people that are a part of our affiliate. They've reported that. So in general, it's not an easy road. It's very hard. And even when you find the perfect medication and you're taking it for a while, it won't work one day or it will work or it causes other symptoms. So through that entire process, it can be very discouraging. You could decide to give up and just go back to the way things were before, but now you have the burden of knowing what's wrong with you. So you're not wrong, but what's different with you. And you're carrying that knowledge, even if you decide to default to what was before. So support is so important. It's so important. And if you don't have any access to any of the things we've talked here today, my information will be available. Let me know. I tell people all the time what they could possibly do. You can also hook up with our affiliate. We're open to more than just women or women identifying folk. Anybody can join. But just like find someone, because they think, oh, you get the diagnosis, you have a slap on the back of so that labels you and you're like, oh, I'm good and I just take these drugs and it's amazing. No, just the beginning of a very long process.
And there's also a LinkedIn SANS in neurodiversity and cybersecurity group. The Slack will go away eventually after the summit. Go in there, share your experiences, don't share your experiences. Just being a part of the group, even if you're not participating, that way, if you ever do have a rough day, you at least have a resource to kind of look through and see if there's anything that may apply to you. And it's a difficult world, but I think that there's always something, hopefully, to make your day just a tiny bit better. And I think that's really, really important. If you can do that for someone and someone can do that for you, whether it's being neurodivergent, whether it's in cybersecurity. I have 4 autoimmune disorders, so I'm chronically ill as well. But finding that one nugget to get you through that sanity of the day, to show that you're human, you're still here, and you're still worth something, is important. So just like anything else in your life, right? Have some kind of support, I think is really what we're saying. And if you don't know because you're new to neurodiversity, research it, reach out and ask questions, because a lot of neurodivergent people who are open about it want to talk about it.
Yep.
Which
Yes.
is unique, right? I mean, I think in cyber too, I mean, it depends on the field, but you know, some people might be experts and they don't want to share their expertise, right? It's that secret sauce, you know, you don't want to share it. A lot of the times that's not neurodiversity.
No.
So
In fact, you'll have to say, please.
put the sauce back in the bottle, it's too much.
It's a lot. Okay. Let's see. All right. Yeah. Questions, Jen?